So I tried LinkedIn Live for the first time the other day, and it seemed to go okay. I was pretty nervous, but it seemed to go okay. I asked for some feedback and suggestions on how I could potentially use the platform, and John came back to me suggesting that maybe a lunch and learn session might work well. So here I am for the first one. As I posted this morning, I thought I would talk about setting your foundations right now. Clients that come in to see me, they come in all different shapes and sizes. Some have a lot of money, some have not so much money. Some are earning a lot, and some are not earning quite so much. So they come in all different shapes and sizes, but particularly those that are in that maybe 35 to 45-year-old age bracket. They'll often have a house, their career's really kicking on, earning some decent money, and starting to think about what's next. They'll often be coming in ultimately looking for me to help them build their wealth over time. But we need to, often with a lot of those types of clients, tread quite slowly in making sure that they've got their, what I call their foundations right in the first place. So sometimes they come in just because they wake up one morning and decide that they're starting to look forward and that they are wanting some help, some assistance in some way, shape or form. But others, there's some type of life event or a trigger event that's caused them to seek out advice. So it's important that I understand what that event is from the outset, because that often shapes what the relationship looks like going forward. So potentially it's the sale of the business. I've put out a fair bit of content around sale of business, inheritance, promotion and pay rises, family, maybe having more kids or upgrading to a bigger house, things like that. But I guess all of those types of clients that particularly in that age bracket, and this applies for clients more broadly, is that they get to a point where they're starting to look at what's next, and that's where I tend to come in. And so I emphasise for those clients that it's incredibly important that we get the foundations right first before we really charge off worrying about investments and super and shares and properties, whatever it might be. Now this kind of 5 areas of foundations that I like to concentrate on. And now different clients are, for some we might skip over these or work through them quite quickly because they might very well have this in order, and others there's a fair bit of work to do, and we might spend a couple of months, 6 months, maybe even 12 months working on particular areas before we move forward. Now those are a cash flow, a debt structure, a personal protection plan, what I like to call wealth succession, and then ultimately the investment and structuring advice. Now we might work on a few of these all together at the same time, but it's important that we identify that there's these kind of 5 areas that I tend to work through. Now I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about what those are. For anyone watching, if you've got any questions, just please put them in the comments there. I've got my iPad here. I can see those and stop from time to time to have a chat about whatever you're commenting on. So starting with the cash flow. Now this is not about a budget. I personally don't have a budget. I find them too time consuming. But where I like to start with the cash flow piece is more about an awareness. So making sure you understand, and this is the most important thing, that you understand it, is what money is coming in versus what money is going out. What are those regular commitments, home loans, childcare fees or school fees, other debt repayments, car loans, whatever it is. What are those regular commitments that you have from month to month? And then also on top of that, what is the discretionary spend? People often get themselves into a bit of a mess with credit cards and multiple bank accounts, and if you're spending money over here on a credit card and you're spending money over here from a bank account, it can get difficult from month to month to really understand or get a handle on where money's going and what you're spending it on. And often just people can end up in a mess with credit card debt. If you throw into the mix that a lot of people, myself included, get paid on a monthly basis, so you get this lump sum of money, get paid on the 15th of the month, you get this lump sum of money comes into your bank account on the 15th of the month, and then most people tend to struggle with, well, how do I try and stretch that for the next 4 or 5 weeks ahead of me? This is where structure really comes into the equation, and it's really important. Something that I encourage a lot of my clients to do, is to set up some structuring through their bank accounts, managing their cash flow to effectively pay themselves on a weekly basis. So you might get this lump sum of money that comes in once a month, but then from there you pay yourself on a monthly basis. So it's a weekly basis. It's much easier to keep track of a small weekly amount than it is this great big lump sum of money. So the important part in the cash flow piece is understanding what's coming in versus what's going out, and the money that is going out, ensuring that you're spending that on things that you're really valuing, and that money isn't being wasted. Now, I have one way of doing that. I've put up previous videos and diagrams and things about how to do that. It's important that individual clients come up with their own way. I can guide them and help them, but it needs to be your way. You need to own it, and the whole planning process really starts with getting a handle on your cash flow. And this is one area where for some clients I might spend 6 months or so working with them on this. There's tools where if we need to, we can track spending through bank accounts and categorize it and all of those kind of things if we really have to. And then there's other clients that their cash flow is under control, however they're managing it. Their bank accounts maybe just slowly progress up from one month to the next. Great, if whatever works for you. So once the cash flow is in order, we can then move on to the next step. Quite often we might do both of these at the same time, and this is debt structuring. So this is not just about interest rates on mortgages. Yes, that's important, but it's also I think much more important to understand or make sure that whatever debt arrangements you've got, whether it's a mortgage on your house, investment property, whatever else it might be, that's set up in a way to support what you're doing from a cash flow point of view, which was that step one. So are you using offset accounts? Is there any extra that we can actually squeeze your existing bank in terms of the interest rates, which ultimately saves you money, which flows back to that cash flow piece in step one? Or can we, or do you need to move to a different bank because they don't offer multiple offset accounts and these kind of things, which might make managing your cash flow from month to month a bit easier. So then we dig into, if you've got investment loans, how are you using them? Have you got offsets there? Have you got money sitting in offset accounts against investment loans when really that should be sitting against your existing home loan, your principal residence? Will you be needing an investment loan? So maybe there's a restructure that's necessary to free up some equity for some ultimate planning that we might do in step 5. So debt and the structuring of that can be incredibly powerful to accelerating your wealth creation over time, but it can also get a lot of people unstuck. So it's really a tread carefully section. Then move on to part 3, and again this might be done in conjunction with parts 1 and 2. And this is about what are called personal protection plans. So doing all the planning and implementing and strategies and all the rest of it, you're going to do all of that in the world. But for most people, whatever planning they're doing going forward is reliant on them continuing to be able to earn an income. Now, if something happens that you are either off work for a period of time, unable to earn, you might become permanently disabled in some way, shape or form, and so you can't work anymore, or it gets a whole lot serious and you pass away, that income's will stop in potentially in all 3 of those situations. So any planning that you're doing comes completely unstuck. So it's really important that we make sure that whatever income is coming in continues to come in no matter what the circumstances. We also then need to consider who and what you might be leaving behind if events transpire that you pass away sooner rather than later. So who are you leaving behind? Spouse, children, mortgages, those kind of things. Will the spouse go back to work? Won't they? And what are your plans around raising kids and supporting them and giving them a kickstart in life? So that's all important in that personal protection plan. But more than anything, there's a real focus on making sure there's a replacement income if you're unable to work for whatever reason. A lot of people are concerned with their life insurance, and that's great, but statistically you're actually much more likely to have a period of time off work than you are to actually die. And it's that period of time off work, it might only be 6 or 9 months, that everything can become completely derailed, particularly if you haven't got any savings and things you can fall back on. 4th step, this is what I refer to as wealth succession. So ultimately, it's estate planning, as others would call it. So this is dealing with the flow of assets that you own to the right people at the right time if you should pass away. So there's a will that's important piece of the puzzle. There's powers of attorney to deal with your affairs on your behalf if you're unable to. If you've got young children, arranging guardianship for them. If something was to happen to you, appointing an appropriate executor to deal with your estate. Quite often we might see people that have executors that are elderly parents. Now that might not be the best outcome in terms of an executor. Appropriate structures post-death, so you can, through your will, make structures available to benefit beneficiaries into the future. And then tied up in that is superannuation nominations. Some people have made nominations, others haven't. Superannuation can be dealt with via your will if you nominate it to go that way, or it can be go to a small number of people directly, completely bypassing the will. But it's an important part of that whole wealth succession piece in there. And then finally we get to what is often what a lot of people who think they're coming in for in the first place, before we uncover a whole lot of other issues that need addressing before we can get there, is that kind of investment structuring and advice and building assets over time. So this is where we start to look at what are you doing now, ultimately where are you trying to get to from a financial point of view, and why, like what's the whole purpose behind it. There's no point building up assets or building up money for the sake of money. It's what is that going to allow you to do, and what type of fulfillment will that bring you in time. So it's typically looking at whatever money is surplus from that cash flow exercise that we've done right at the very top, and then working through the debt restructuring, for example, to free up a little bit more if we can. So what's available, and then ultimately what are we doing, or how are we going to use that rather to help build your assets over time. Part of the puzzle is often equity in a house. So if you own a house and you've had it for some time, maybe paid the debt down, you might have some equity built up in there that you can pull out to buy an investment property, invest in shares, whatever it might be. And so there's a kind of a planning, mapping out process to say, well, you're here, you're trying to get to here, what are some of the things that we can do to help you get there, and ultimately what does it mean for you. So as with any goal setting, ideally that there's kind of measurable outcomes with that. There's some type of time frame attached, and then given the world that I often work in, that there's some type of monetary value attached. So that gives you something to work towards, keeps me accountable, and something to work towards in helping you to ultimately build those assets over time. So they're the 5 areas that I would often work through with clients. There's the cash flow piece, debt structuring, personal protection plan, wealth succession, and then ultimately the investment structuring and advice. That's it for today. Doesn't seem to be any questions or anything in the live stream, so hopefully this was worthwhile. I'm planning to do another one next week. Thinking of doing something around kids and money, and helping to educate children with dealing with money if they're starting to earn, or they're getting gifts and presents and those kind of things. I've got a young family, and it's something that I'm starting to grapple with myself, so I thought I'd spend a bit of time talking about that. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.